All right, hey, Amir Muradali here, creator of Job Search Mastery, and welcome to the first ever spotlight on talent. And this is something that I'm doing. I'm offering professionals to help them highlight um, really where they are or their true value at this point in their career. And this is something I'm offering to professionals who are actively seeking work. So this is a tool, a medium for you to communicate your messages that you can't necessarily communicate through your resume and your LinkedIn profile. But it's also a tool for professionals who are looking for their next level career opportunity and really want to explore sort of where they are right now and what their true value is right now, and also communicate that those values to their existing employers. So this is really the purpose of these spotlights on talent. And the conversation that you're going to see here is all based on the proprietary framework that I have in Job Search Mastery. And so with that, let's begin. Today's spotlight is on Sarah Karim. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, Amir. Good. How are you?
I'm good. So you're the first person I'm spotlighting. How do you feel about that?
Great. I feel like I won the prize.
Oh, there you go. You did.
Yeah.
So why don't we begin by you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I graduated way back in 2005 from the University of Calgary in the field of business process management.
Yeah.
At that time, it was a new field, and that it's a mix between MIS and operations management.
Okay.
So I graduated in 2005, and from there, the following year, I started at CP Rail. I was at CP Rail for quite some time, actually, in about 3 different roles, ranging from customer service to car management, and finally ending at business process improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Hunter Harrison, he actually took over as CEO of the company, and he deemed our department redundant. So everybody in our department was unfortunately let go, but we got severance packages, so that's always nice.
That bonus, yes.
Yes, always a bonus.
Yes.
Yeah, and then from there I went on and I did a contract role at Pembina Pipelines again in logistics. So I was a logistics analyst, and that was great because it was my first time dabbling in the oil and gas field, and I learned so much in that role, and like everything was just packed into 1 year, and I learned vocabulary, and I learned all like the pipelines, and I learned everything in that 1 year. It was just phenomenal, the things I learned in that 1 year. So it was a wonderful opportunity, and the people were great. And then from there, the market crashed. So I was in a position where I was without job. So I decided to do a little bit of traveling on my own, or sorry, not on my own, but to take some time for myself and do some traveling. So I went traveling with my mom and my sister to London, England, and Turkey. And then I came back and I helped my parents plant an organic garden. I was enjoying the time to be able to spend with my parents, because you don't often get that type of time to spend,
Right.
with your parents. So it was great. And they're retired, so it was really nice. And then from there, I decided, I'm like, okay, maybe I should go back to contributing to society. So I started temping. And then from there, that led to a full-time role with AgriTeam Canada. And then kind of from there, I went on to Kids U. And that's kind of my experience in a bucket. So
That's your 9 years in a bucket.
yeah.
9 years?
Wow, I don't know where 9 years has gone, but yeah, that's my 9 years.
Wow. And so actually, no, you, it's 12 years.
Oh yeah, 9 years yeah, you're right, actually.
It is
Yeah.
12 years. Look at that.
Yeah, 12 years. Oh my.
Time
You're
flies when
aging
you're having
me,
fun, isn't it?
yeah. Wow,
So,
12 years.
so you left Kids U, and now you are actively seeking work.
Yes.
And where are you right now? How are you feeling about the industries that, I mean, you've had a variety of industry
Yes.
experience, and so where are you right now? Where are you feeling that you wanna step into?
Um, well, we live in Calgary, so it's always nice to go into the oil and gas field here. That being said, I think everybody wants to be in the oil and gas field. What I have realized is that being able to do logistics in all those different industries that I did logistics in, you
Yeah.
realize that logistics is a field that can thrive in any company. So sure, there might be big departments in oil and gas field in the oil and gas fields in logistics, but
Yeah.
in childcare, in management consulting, in the pipelines, there's logistics everywhere. So for me, it's very nice because I feel like my background, my experience, and my education can lead me to do basically any industry. So
Yeah.
it's kind of wherever I see like an interesting posting, or if I'm chatting with somebody through networking and I see an experience, and through chatting, and someone says, oh, hey, why don't you try this? I
Right.
think it's nice because the field of logistics can thrive anywhere, so it's really great.
Yeah, I mean, operations, like we're business owners, so operations is a huge, I guess, a, a big piece of the pie
Yes.
when it
Yeah.
comes to business. And it doesn't matter which business, every business wants to run efficiently and
Yeah.
optimally and what have you. So
And cut
um,
costs. Yeah.
yeah, minimize costs and what
Yeah.
have you. So let me just ask you this, like, why operations? Why do you have this affinity for operations and love for operations?
Yeah, it's so weird. I even when I was going into business process management at U of C, I sort of asked myself that same question, and
Yeah.
it's I don't know what it is, but it's this love of seeing all these puzzle pieces, and being able to be in a position in any industry to say, okay, so let's take these puzzle pieces, let's put them like this, let's slot them like this, and then you see this big overall picture, and you
Hmm.
see that it works phenomenally, and that that efficiency and that cost savings, and that's you're streamlining and you're doing all of this stuff. I love to see that big picture, and I love to see things work great. And it really came through, like even at CP Rail, like when you had this big project. So for example, I did army moves at CP Rail with flat cars,
Okay.
and it was crazy because you had an army move that was 200 rail cars large, and you had to make sure that everything lined up. You had your heavy duty flat cars, you had to go get them from somewhere else, make sure they were in that location at the right time, make
Yeah.
sure that they all lined up the way that the army individuals wanted them to be lined up so that they could load their tanks. And it was just something that was just, everything had to work perfectly. And then when you take a step back and you realize, you're like, oh, I did that. So it's a wonderful feeling. And I think that's where my love for operations, logistics, and supply chain, all of that comes in.
So it sounds like you went from university to really the deep end, because railway transportation, I mean, talk about a busy, logistically focused business.
Yeah.
I mean, you've
Yeah.
got so many moving parts. I mean, you've
Yeah.
got client demands, you've got your own performance requirements you got to meet, and
Yeah.
you've got rail cars that you have to maintain and availability and
Yeah. And
market
the
demand.
changing of the market, and
Yeah.
like, pulp is very big in a certain type of season. So you have to make sure you have your box cars, right? So it was a phenomenal experience to work at CP Rail. So it
Did
was great.
you at any point, but like if I was there, I'd pull my hair out if I had any, because I'm not a logistics focused person. But how did you manage yourself? And it sounds like it was quite a demanding field or demanding
Yes.
company to work in, and demanding, but given you, I mean, I'm just looking at your resume here, and when you said the kinds of things that you had to do as an equipment coordinator, that was for like about almost 4 years. I mean, sounds like you had your hands full and then some.
Yes. So I'll give you an example of a situation where I guess my calmness came into play. We had an avalanche, and so there was a situation where all of our box cars, like my 100-foot, they're not mine, but CP Rail's
Yes.
100-foot box cars were buried, and so everyone was basically, like in the department, was kind of a little bit freaking out because we had to get, CP Rail, your rail cars work on a just-in-time situation, right? So you need to get it to the customer in time for them to load their product and not have a situation where they shut down. So, we had an avalanche. Okay, so this is like an act of God. So everyone's freaking out. And so I told my manager, I said, you know what, I just need 5 to 10 minutes. I'm just going to go for a little walk. And so we were in Gulf Canada Square at that time. So I took a little walk. I went downstairs. I went to Tim Hortons. I got myself a little steep tea. I just sat down for a bit and I was like, okay, I can handle this. We can do it. We'll be okay. So I took my 10 minutes and I went back upstairs and I told my boss, I said, okay, let's do it. Let's figure out a solution. And we did. We figured out a solution. We got them boxcars, and even though they weren't the 100-foot, we were able to get them rail cars, 75-foot boxcars. Right. But still, they didn't have to shut down, right? And that's the key, right? And so I think
that's amazing. You so just to make sure that we're giving credit where credit is due, is not because of Tim Hortons.
Well, I don't know. It could be, but yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Those steep teas are really good.
I know. Yeah.
But so I'm starting to see. I can understand how you managed yourself in such a demanding field or in demanding job, because staying calm through all those demands. Through just managing all those moving pieces, you have to be calm, and it's a super coordination activity.
Yeah. And you can't panic, because panicking is not going to solve any situation. And so you just got to go with the flow, and you have to take time. Like, the key is to take time for yourself, to give yourself so I gave myself that walk. It was what I needed. Yeah. So 5 minutes of self-care, and I went back and I just was able to handle that situation. So it was great.
Was this a one-time deal, or is this like a continued practice for Sarah?
Well, so for example, at CP Rail, you have to expect anything, right? So anything can happen. It could be a derailment, it can be an avalanche, it can be any situation. And so you just have to be on your game, right? So it wasn't just a one-time deal. Like, this is something that in any industry. So, so for example, not saying that it did happen, but in the pipelines, there could be a leak. Yes. At Kids U, so for example, there was this one time at Kids U where I was at a certain location and we smelled gas. And so we had to just kind of say, okay, what do we do? And so I said that, you know what, I'm not willing to put 200 kids' lives at risk. So I made the decision and I said, no, we're calling 911. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So we called 911. We vacated the premises, and they came in, and thankfully it wasn't a gas leak or anything like that. It was some work that they were doing on the roof that made it smell like gas. But the gas smell was there, and you have to always put those kids' lives first. And so I made that decision, and I made the call, and I said, no, we're calling 911. Like, this is not a joking matter, right? So we called 911, we evacuated, and luckily we were able to go back in, I think, about 10 minutes. But
now this at Kids U, you had a leadership role there, right?
I did. Yeah, I started off as a operations lead. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, first of all, I've had, like, my kid go through Montessori, and so I fully appreciate all the safety measures the staff takes. So definitely, I think every parent would be grateful for you to take that step. I know it's tough from a business perspective,
Yeah, it is.
but you have to put your kids in safety and make it a top priority. So kudos to you for making that decision. And so I'm starting to see a pattern. Like you spent 7 years, a long time at CP, CP Rail, working with all these demanding challenges, and with all those moving pieces that you still know about. You have this unknown X factor that comes in, which is like an avalanche or act of God or something.
Yeah.
And then you've got to manage around it. So it sounds like you went through, I would argue, you went through some pretty tough leadership development right there, which kind of shows that why you were able to do so well at Kids U in the leadership role. So how did you find? I mean, that was your first leadership role.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you find that?
So it's always great to be in a leadership position. You get to make these decisions that before you had to run by people. Like, for example, calling 911, or even other situations, you're like, no, we're going to do this, or, and you get to make all these decisions, but it's not all, unicorns and rainbows, right? So, even though I got to take part in the hiring of a lot of individuals, I also had to take part in the letting go of individuals. And that's always a tough situation, because you're put in a position where you have to see two sides. So you have to see the side from the individual that you're letting go, and you have to see that, you're letting them go and this is going to drastically change their lives, right? So it's not like a laughing matter, but you have to also remember that they weren't putting the children's needs first. And so that always has to come first. That has to be our priority. And so, but regardless, letting people go is never easy, and it's never a fun thing. I think that was probably the hardest part of being in a leadership role, was the letting go of individuals. And I think I'm stronger for it. I think now, if I was in a position and I had to let somebody go, I think I could now. And it's it doesn't make it easier, but you have that experience, right? And so, it helps a little to have some experience. So.
And a lot of leaders I know would argue that really you aren't a leader until you've had to fire someone.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you're right, like, leadership is not all rainbows and unicorns. I mean, it's, in my personal opinion, it's leadership is it's a noble profession, because it's not just the business that you're impacting, but you are impacting people's mental health, because they look up to you, they look to you for cues, signals. You kind of have to make sure that they're happy, okay, and what have you. But those whatever it is that they take from work, they take it home too, right? And so you have the sphere of influence of you as a leader goes well beyond just the four walls of the business.
The workplace, so, for sure.
So I have huge appreciation and respect for anyone who steps into a leadership role and does it well. And I mean, you've got, for you to step into Kids U, first of all, a completely different business than CP Rail. Mind you, you could argue kids are kind of like really unpredictable puzzle pieces, but you didn't have to deal with kids. Like you were dealing mostly with staff, right?
So what happened was, after about 5 months of being the operations lead, they restructured the organization, and unfortunately they restructured my job. So that meant that I was basically out of a job. I had a great relationship with the HR lady that was in the position at the time. And so I sat down with her and I talked to her and I said, look, it's not a great market in Calgary right now. Is there nothing you could offer me? And so she said, well, you have a childcare level now because Kids U wanted all of their employees to have at least a level 1. So she said, you have a childcare level. She's like, you can go into the classrooms and teach.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of took a step back and I said, well, it's a little bit out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never done it before, but sure, let's do it. Like it's a way to be in the classroom and right on the ground, the ground floor, and to kind of be with the kids. And so I said yes. And so I spent, I think another 5 or 6 months again with the kids. So in the classrooms.
That's amazing. So I have a newfound respect for you because I did not know that. Talk about range. Talk about professional range for you to be able to actually step in. I mean, first of all, normally people don't like change. And change is tough. I mean, change is hard to deal with. And it's hard to go from one industry to, first of all, it's hard to go from one job to another, meaning even if you're in the same company.
Definitely.
And, normally people don't like even just small changes to the job description that they have to do. But here you are not just changing companies, but changing industries and changing the work that you do. That's amazing. This fierceness, where did this courage, where did this fierceness and courage come from?
I always have to give credit to my parents, because I always look at them and realize that they came here with nothing, like literally nothing. So my mom was she was born in Uganda, and she came here, and they were kicked out of Uganda by Idi Amin. And there was civil unrest in Tanzania, which is why my dad left. And then through, some kind of serendipitous, reasons, they met in Toronto, and they got married in Toronto, and they came to Calgary because my dad didn't like Toronto. It was too big for him. So they came to Calgary, and they had my sister and myself. And I think that resiliency, I really get from them. And because my dad has always taught me to never do anything, half, like, no, don't ever do anything, halfway. Always go the full 110%, and, always find that way to just push through, and to, whether, even if it's just one step at a time, just get there. And so I think I get that resilience from my parents.
That's amazing. Sounds like you look up to them. Sounds like amazing parents, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
And you really look up to them. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
So just to kind of like a sidestep here in terms of what we're talking about here. Actually, before we sidestep, I'm just curious. You focused on business process management in university, in your degree, and you had that one-time experience in doing business process improvement at CP Rail, and you moved into that role from the equipment coordinator role. And could you just help me understand, how did you move from being an equipment coordinator to getting into business process improvement? Because from what I understood here, you're working across multiple business units to help them improve business process. Could you help us connect how you went from one to the other?
Sure. I think that when you end up in a position like business process improvement, and you're improving processes, you first have to know the business. And so when I started in customer service, what a better way to learn the business other than to sit down and to be on the phones with your clients, and to help solve their issues. And then from there, going into car management, you really, really learn the business in car management. So I spent 4 years there. And what a wonderful group it was. And I still keep in touch with some of the individuals in that department. But you learn the business, and you learn the rail cars, and you learn the industries. You learn what type of rail car goes with what industry, and you really, really learn the business in car management. And then from there, I went to business process improvement, where my clients were internal. And so we would have internal clients in different departments across CP Rail, and we would work with them to improve the processes that were maybe a little bit broken in their department, or that needed a little bit of tweaking, or that weren't working well. And so it was great because I was able to actually, while I was in business process improvement, I was able to travel to Minneapolis and kind of roll out some processes there in equipment placement and things like that in their yards to make them more efficient. And so I think that before you go into a position, like anything that has to do with processes, you need to know the business first.
Right.
And I think that that's very important. And so anyone who says otherwise, like, I think that you really do need to understand the business, and you need to spend time knowing the business. Right. So yeah, I think for me, I was ready at that point, because after the 4 years in car management, even my director said, you know what, we think you're ready. So she helped me apply for that job, which is great. It's great when you have a director or a manager saying that, you know what, we think that you have learned everything that you can in this department. Like, I had gone from center beams to box cars to flat cars to, like, to all of these different fleets. And, she's the one who approached me and said, like, there's this position. She's like, would you like to apply? And, she's like, I think you would do really well in it because you've spent so long in car management. And so she recognized something in me to know that I was ready to move on. And so I appreciate the fact that she came to me and said, you know what, she wasn't that type of manager that said, no, I want to hold on to her because she's great. She wanted to see me thrive. And so she offered that position to me. She said, why don't you apply? And so I did. And
you got it.
That's
amazing. That's amazing, because I was curious, like, how you ended up in that role. Is this something that you actually actively seeking, or is this something that was brought to your attention? Were you championed in? Were you invited in? It's always great when you're championed into a role, and the fact that you had this director recognize the qualities that you had and make that connection and say, she thinks that you would be quite effective in this other role. I mean, that's the ideal way to be invited into another role. And it really speaks both highly of the director, but also highly of you. The fact that they noticed that you're not just somebody who just comes in, does the job, but you're pretty much like, there's something about you that you could jump into this role and be effective. I have business process experience, and I know the challenge that it is to, first of all, understand that, yes, you do. I agree with you 100%. You have to really understand the business. Yeah. But it's also quite challenging because you still have internal stakeholders can be tough and demanding, and you're working with people who possibly have their own little quirks and agendas and things like that. So it's a party on its own. And the fact that
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
It is a party. Just like that's a party. Like you went from party to party to party, actually, here, just looking at your resume. So I'm a bit envious, I should say. So I just want to make the switch here, just kind of like, away from talking about your experiences. Now, if I were to ask you, okay, so this is now we're just gonna have a little question answer fun time. If I were to ask you, what would people say, like people who knew Sarah really well, what 3 words would they use to describe you?
Great question. I think resilient is one, especially when you would see me in that situation at CP Rail or any of the situations, like even at Kids U and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm able to, take a hard situation and make it okay, and work through those hard situations that you need to get through in order to make things okay.
Right.
And you don't. The second one that I think people would say that they notice about me is that I have good relationship management skills, and so at every one of my jobs that I've been at, I've been able to create amazing relationships with the people that I've worked with. So, for example, like at CP Rail, I still get in touch with my director from business process improvement. He's long retired, but we meet up for coffee every couple months, just because
awesome.
just because we got along very well. And same with some of my coworkers in the customer service department way back
2006, 2007. Yeah. That's amazing.
So I meet up with them, but the life at CP Rail was like a family, right? And so I kind of take that mentality with me to every place that I go to. And so even at Pembina, I made some great relationships, even at Kids U. So I've made amazing relationships, and I think that that's something that people really do notice about me, is that I can make lasting relationships. And so I think for me, that's great.
I agree.
Now, thank you. And so one more, right? I need one more. I think I work really well in a team environment. Not to say that I don't work well individually, but I think that I like working in a team. I like feeding off other people's energy. I like to ask questions. I ask lots of questions. I like to hear other people's suggestions. And, when you hear those suggestions, you're like, okay, great. And, this might be my business process improvement mind, but I'm like, okay, so how can we use that and make it a little bit better?
Right.
And how can so things like that. So I think that would be the third thing that people notice about me, is that I work really well in a team situation, and I value everybody's suggestions and values everybody's input, and I take the time to get to hear them. So you don't just sit there, kind of, and not listen to other people, but you actually hear them. So,
right.
Yeah.
I would agree that that's what people would see about you, and really, that really speaks to your brand as a professional, and in terms of how it really comes down to how people feel about you, and how they feel about you is they're gonna come back and they're gonna say those things, right? I mean, that's really what your recommendations are gonna be focused on. Your what do you call them? Your references, when they make the reference calls, that's what they'll talk about. Do you mind if I share some 3 words that really came to me when I'm looking at your resume and
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, I would love that. Go ahead.
So I would first of all, I would say absolute resilience, but I would sort of change resilience to toughness. You've got a level of toughness that I have. It's rare. It's rare that, especially now, in a time when it's there's so much effort trying to make sure people feel good, feel comforted and stuff. And, once that happens, you sort of lose that edge, and, you lose that sense of toughness. But you really demonstrated your toughness going from, industry to industry, job to job, function to function, given the market conditions that we're in. I mean, you're not sitting back. You're jumping in head first, and you're taking it on. So kudos to you. So toughness is
Thank
one
you.
thing that I see. You know, and you do need that level of toughness to jump into unfamiliar territory, learn something new completely,
Yeah.
and be effective and say, hey, you know, okay, whatever it is, I'm here. Let's make it work. Let's go. Kind of like what you did with that rail car situation. It's like, okay, we're here. Here we are. Let's make this work. Let's go. So that demonstrates to me a kind of toughness that I think it would be incredibly valuable to any business. So
Thank you.
that's one. Friendliness. I mean, you've been in my network for a while, and you've
Yeah.
been cordial and friendly. And I recently met you. Like, it's probably been like about a year or two since I met you in person, and so we know each other personally. So yes, friendly is something that I would say that I would say I know about you. The 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 third word that I would suggest that you think about is you're a leader. You're and when I say a leader, I don't mean like I'm not trying to pump you up and what have you. I don't say this in a flattering way. I'm really saying this from a sense of what I understand leadership to be, and because I work with a lot of leaders, and I work with leaders and help them get to get to 80% of where you are right now, which is you think about the business, you think about practicality, you think about what needs to get done, you embrace the toughness of the situation, but you are human and you are present in the situation, and you go through with it. You don't have fantastical notions of what a leader should be, and it's not a title that you're chasing in terms of to make yourself and your ego feel good, which essentially makes you a leader. And
Thank you. Thank
and
you.
I think that's a word that comes to my mind when I look at your varied background, and you'd be a very effective leader in any in any business, any circumstance, any industry. Like, you've demonstrated that you can be effective in any industry. You can learn.
Yeah.
And if I can add a couple more words, I would say adaptable for sure, and a fast learner. That you are, you've demonstrated this. It's not just, again, like I said, I'm not just here pumping you up or anything. It's like you've demonstrated it. So I really hope this is what folks have gotten out of this video is really what you're all about. I mean,
I hope so too.
The qualities that you've demonstrated, the kinds of experiences that you've been through, where you are now mentally, emotionally, intellectually, how your experiences have built you up to this point. Really, you are positioned. I would say you'd be a talent, a highly valued talent, and an asset to any organization. Now, speaking from a business perspective, any organization that is looking to really going through some organizational change, going through some business change, but really just wanting to look in and say, hey, can we do things better? Not really looking for a warm body to occupy a seat, a chair, but really looking for somebody who's going to be an agent of change, whether that's a sole contributor or in a leadership role. And so I really hope employers get to see this about you through this video.
I hope so too. Yeah.
So that's my words. I think we're gonna cap it off here. But before we do, any last words? Any things that you want to say?
Well, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to add a third dimension to what people can see, other than the LinkedIn profile and other than your resume. This is something that will give them that third dimension, and I'm very excited for people to see that. So, but I'd like to thank you for for offering me this opportunity to do so. So thank
My
you.
absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. And this is, again, like I said, is my first ever focus or spotlight on talent. And what talent better to start off than with Sarah? Sarah.
Thank you so much, Amir. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Really, thank you for joining, and everyone, thank you for watching. If you want to get a hold of Sarah, I'm going to add her LinkedIn profile, or a link to her LinkedIn profile below this video. So go ahead, feel free, get in touch with her. Can people get in touch with you through LinkedIn?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So get in touch with Sarah if you're interested. You're in a situation, you're looking for some great talent to help you with the business, improve efficiency, optimize your operations.
Send me a message through LinkedIn. Yep.
Send Sarah a message. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amir.
You're welcome.